here we are with our wonderful young people on the Film 42 project. The first time they're meeting Patrick, so Patrick was one of the researchers on the We Tell You Perceptions report, which basically led to this project being set up. So it's a report that's all about the experiences of young black men with mental health services, with mental health generally, what the perceptions are within the community, what the stereotypes are, and what the barriers are to them potentially getting early help. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit of an introduction. Miracle, do you want to throw a question out, Patrick?
I wanted to know what made you interested in discussing, in finding out more about mental health among black men.
Good question. Thanks for having me in the room first. It's really cool to be sat down here talking with folks. In response to the question, I was approached by a number of individuals. A lot of my research and the work I've been involved with has been concerned with the overrepresentation, particularly of young black men within the criminal justice system. So the argument simply goes that we're more likely to be stopped and searched by the police, more likely to get more punitive, harsh punishments in courts, we're more likely to end up in custody. But alongside some of that work, what I also found and what I became aware of was that young black men in particular are likely to be pulled into mental health services and more likely to get the more harsh end of mental health services. So it was always an area I was interested in. And also, I don't see them as different. I see the institutions, prisons, the same as mental health hospitals. So there was a conversation I was really interested in, well, what are the explanations for that overrepresentation? And then I was approached by staff on 42nd Street who came in and says, look, we're really concerned that the absence or the lack of black men who are accessing services, but the evidence always points towards that young black men do have and do experience well-being, mental health concerns. So that was the start of the project. And it was essentially about how do we get in and begin to explore what some of these issues are. So that's what I was about, and that's where I came from. Yeah?
Anyone got any other questions? See you thinking there, Dana. I see you thinking there. You got a question?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Then you kind of answered my question.
Go, ask me again.
What's the meaning of life?
No, I was gonna say, what prompted you to start your research, but you already said it.
But it was important as well because there wasn't much research around the area. So my concern was there were a lot of people who were saying, well, young black men experience mental health concerns or well-being problems, but they don't access treatment. And if you don't access treatment, then what happens is you're more likely to have a range of mental health concerns and problems. So it almost became this chicken and egg question. So people were really interested in, okay, well, what are the barriers that stop individuals from accessing services? Or are the barriers that stop individuals from accessing services? And that was a starting point of the research. So what we did was we spoke to nearly 80 individuals, young people. We sat around, had conversations, focus groups. I didn't do the research. The research was undertaken by young people in the community. So they did the research themselves. But in essence, what they did was spoke with other young people about, okay, well, what is mental health? What is mental illness? What do we think causes it? What do we think drives it? And how do young black men in particular respond to that experience of mental health? And that for me was a really interesting part of the research, how we as young black men begin to explore and think about mental health and well-being issues.
Cool. I wanted to ask a question. Was there anything when you were doing this research that popped up that surprised you? Was there anything that was like, wow, this is surprising, this is news to me?
Not in a condescending way, but the people who responded to the research were more than capable and clear of understanding what mental health concerns were, what well-being issues were, what some of the triggers for that may have been. They were more than aware of what those issues were. So, and young black men sat around and spoke about it. So spoke about, look, if I feel this way, then this is what I'd want to do. Some of them also felt they couldn't speak to certain people. So they had friends, but only one of those friends they could talk to about it. They wouldn't want to speak to everyone about it, in case it was flipped back on them. And then people started to take liberties and take the piss out of them. So they were conscious of that. They were also aware of mental health because, and this comes out in the research quite heavily, in certain communities, in our communities, we know the individual who walks around. There's always been that story, that individual who's in Asda or walks down the street doing this. And there's always that sense of, well, this is what happened to that person. But what was striking was that respondents, young people who took part in the research, also spoke about the pressures of school, A-levels, parents' separation or divorce. It's been really difficult for them to engage with bereavements, the loss of friends or the loss of family members. All they recognise could trigger well-being problems and poor mental health. So that was what was quite stark for me in terms of that recognition and that acknowledgement. And it also begs a question: if young black men recognise those drivers, then why are we not accessing treatments? And why is it only when it comes to a point of crisis and then the police are called, that we respond to those issues? So that again became one of the key focal points of the research. Another thing that struck me, and I'd be interested in people's views on this as well, was the sense that young people says, well, we want mental health services, but we don't want them to be called mental health services. So there was almost this acknowledgement but a recognition of a stigma, which means, no, we don't want to be caught up in that stigma. So whilst we want interventions, we don't want them to look like going into 42nd Street or going into Zion or going into other services. And I found that quite an interesting finding as well.